Actually, just commenting on again on the situation in the Middle East. I mean, it's true that the Arab governments can, thus far, by and large, have succeeded, so to speak, in stopping their masses from doing something. But at the same hand, they cannot also force their people to do. They can stop them from doing something, but they cannot make them do something else, which is to normalize with Israel, to actually accept and deal, to go visit Israel. Actually, I think one of the, I don't know if it's a surprise to you, Mark, probably we all are aware of it, one of the greatest debates right now in the Arab world is whether Arabs should or should not visit Jerusalem as an Islamic holy site, and debate at the highest, at the top scholars of Islamic scholars and Arab scholars. I mean, so what I'm saying is, yes,
they shouldn't visit it because it's still under occupation.
Right,
they should wait.
Right. I mean, what I'm saying is that,
and the great majority have decided to put it off.
Of course.
Right.
Except for the Palestinians. They give, I mean, even there was fatwa, religious decrees that came out that prohibiting people from going, I mean, Arab countries like from Egypt or from Libya or from, Jordan for that matter, except for the Palestinian people because they have their relatives and their things and they obliged to go there and back and forth. There is necessity for them. But the decree that came out from religious scholars that prohibited people from going to use it as a hajj, which is part of the Islamic, as a sunnah it's called, which is a tradition, that people after they do go to hajj in Mecca, they visit Jerusalem because this was the, this first qibla or the first, direction that the Muslims started prayers. And now most of the people, they don't go there for a visit. Even the people in the West Bank, they cannot even visit it to be
well, they can't.
They can't.
I mean, there too. Maybe as an American Jew, I'm free to use language that's a little stronger. We've all been there. We all know the situation. I mean, what's quite amazing to me is how apartheid was so discredited in South Africa, so much so that the whites of South Africa felt they had to give it up. And yet, when you go to Palestine, the system of Middle East apartheid, with different color license plates, different color identifications, different people through different passes, restrictions on who can move where, to what city, to what area of the city. I mean, these are typical apartheid policies that pass for peace process at the moment, but on the ground restrict Palestinian life in ways that blacks in South Africa were never restricted.
Of course, the acquaintance of the American public with the apartheid in South Africa was a result of a dedicated effort by some Americans who cared about it to bring it to the attention of the broader American public. Unfortunately, when anyone tries to bring the attention of Israeli apartheid to the American public, they get branded as an anti-Semite.
Well, maybe that's why it's easier for some of us who are American Jews, and in my case, having spent some years representing the World Jewish Congress. But nevertheless, maybe some of the burden is also on your own shoulders. Maybe the black community in this country did a better job dealing with apartheid in South Africa than the Arab American community has done with dealing with Palestine.
Which that goes back to your question earlier, why the Israeli lobby here is so strong and the Arabs, which is even when the Muslims are almost equal. Because if you go back, not too far in history, which is America was not really leaning toward Israel that much in the 1956 war, which Israel was part of it, and the British and the French, that the United States took its own interest, looked at its own interest, and stood and demanded from Israel to withdraw from Sinai, and so the other countries. But that's when the Jews, I think, around supporting Israel, that realized the need to organize stronger and be more stronger and more vocal in the American politics. And then when they organize and start becoming more powerful, which is the Arabs or the Muslims, they are not even at the start yet, even to become to that point.
What about your own organization, the Islamic Association for Palestine?
We are not a lobbyist organization. We're more or less yet to organize ourselves as people, yet to become lobbyists. We're not a lobbyist. We don't even have the means or even the knowledge yet to do it. And for something, second thing, that the Arabs and the Muslims in this country, they are either first or second generation, barely, not more than that. Plus, they are not in the positions even to go to the lobbying and get to that point, which is not.
Aren't you letting yourself a little off the hook too easily? There's plenty of organizations in Washington that claim to be lobbying organizations. There's the National Association of Arab Americans. There's the Arab American Institute. There's the Arab American Anti-Discrimination Committee. Why is your house so in disorder?
We're talking about my organization. We're talking
No,
about the general.
talking about
Well-
Arab Americans who care about issues in the Middle East, just like blacks cared about South Africa.
Unfortunately, with these lobbies, they did some work, which is some of it good, and I don't deny that. And
Now let's
in
be
AAA.
very candid about
candid,
those
they,
things.
they did some good work. That's but look at them again. If you look at in the AAA, the AI, the ADC you're talking about, which is I'm familiar with all of them, and
I was sure you would be.
and they're coming from one particular angle. Actually, first of all, they try to represent the Arab world as a whole, and there's 23 governments. They have different interests in the United States. Now they lost themselves, like in AAA. That's why they lost. They tried at the beginning, before the peace process, they were actually all the Arabs that gathering themselves and uniting themselves around the cause of Palestine or the Palestinians. Now they feel this organization. If you go back to them now, they feel that, or they've been pushed to believe that this cause is over with. So there is no need to lobby anymore. That's why they are weak.
All right, but you've
That's
been
me.
living in Chicago. Ghassan's been living here in Washington, and I think he knows these organizations inside and outside. Why are they all so impotent, and why is there no real Arab lobby after all these years?
Well, you see, lobby really, by definition, is you have to allocate, to find, to mobilize masses. In order to mobilize masses, you need, other than brains, technology, etc., you also need money. Unfortunately, it hasn't. I mean, it's not that.
The Arab world is rich.
There hasn't been lacking money. No, there hasn't been a lack of money. To be honest, I know that. I think, Mark. I mean, I think to argue that the Palestinians. I mean, I would grant you that. I mean, he was a bit too generous for them. They've
I thought
achieved
so.
some successes. I don't know really what successes they've achieved, but having not wanting to disagree and maybe we'll give them the benefit of the doubt. I think also I'm willing to say that it's a terribly uphill battle in the United States. To be quite honest, by and large, this whole society is mobilized, is geared, is set to all of its masses information, all of its sources of information, from the kindergarten schools to the graduate schools, is geared really to, unfortunately, in one way, to demeaning Islam and Arabs, and to not necessarily loving Judaism and Jews, but they have somehow respect of them or fear of them. I don't know.
Ghassan, 2 generations ago, the Jewish community couldn't even get the president to bomb the train tracks leading into the ovens in Nazi Germany. Jews couldn't join country clubs, couldn't join fraternities, were ostracized in all social areas. Now that's changed a great deal in this country, but aren't you all being rather generous to your own institutions and organizations?
No, I don't want to be generous to our institutions and our
I wasn't actually
organizations.
generous.
I'll be the radical here, as I always have been on many occasions. The Arab and the Islamic types of organizations and associations that we have as Muslim Americans, Arab Americans, Palestinian Americans, these types of outfits have failed, and failed miserably, precisely for the reason that they have been manipulated through financial connections, through other means, by the intrusion and the interference of Arab governments that depend for their survival not upon their own populations, but upon the guarantees that they receive from such governments as the United States, European governments, and then the trail will lead us all the way back to Tel Aviv. So if these types of governments have come and sponsored these types of organizations, we can expect nothing but failure. And let me take the issue of South Africa, because I think that's very apt in comparison. You have an African American community here in the United States, and you have an American or Muslim American community in the United States. One of them rallied against apartheid, the African American community. The other one made a big fuss, a lot of noise about rallying against Israel. Now, why did the African American community sort of have it its way, at least as it appears, apartheid has been dismantled, at least in a legal sense, in an official sense, even though if you go down, I was just there a couple of weeks, last week as a matter of fact, I just came back from there, and I've been there several times, and I've experienced, for all practical purposes, apartheid still exists. It just made a little shift from being outwardly political to becoming inwardly economical. But anyways, the African American community here did not have the interference of African governments in their own affairs. They set about with one objective, and that is to do away with apartheid. Now, we have Muslim Americans or Arab Americans, we have to deal with the Arab governments here. Not only are we against the Israeli government, but we're also against the Arab governments, as it turns out. And because
all of them, without exception?
I don't take any. Well, I make one exception. That is the Sudan. The Islamic government in Sudan has not been, maybe because it hasn't been given the opportunity, whatever the case, circumstances are, has not been a meddling factor in the affairs of, as far as Arab governments go, of the Muslim and Arab community in the United States. Now, all of the others, especially the rich ones, the richer you go, the more this statement becomes
Saudis at the top of the list.
Saudis absolutely. The Saudis have been probably, if we wanted to be frank, I'm sorry my colleagues don't want to.
Yes, we do want to be frank.
The Saudis are as lethal, as detrimental, as dangerous to the future of the Middle East, to Arab-American relations, to Jewish-Muslim relations, as is the Israeli government. I don't have any problems with saying this.
Could you explain it, though? Could you
I can
explain
explain it here in Washington, D.C. Our case, the Islamic Center in Washington, D.C. We have a cathedral mosque here. And
on Massachusetts.
On Massachusetts Avenue, 2551 Mass Avenue, Embassy Row.
Good address, right.
Yeah. In front of all the diplomats, all the politicians there. We had an election there, the end of 1981, and a new administration was elected. Remember, election is a key word. We want elections. That's the problem with us here in the United States. We're supposed to have it as American citizens, as aliens who abide by the laws of this land. After a year and a half, all of a sudden the Saudis intrude with force into those elections, displace the elected body of people there, and get away with it. And they've been getting away with it now for 13 years and 2 months. They've undid an election here in Washington, D.C., and they continue to meddle in the affairs of the Arab, the Palestinian, and the Islamic
It's more than
communities.
meddling. It's infiltrating and controlling.
Subverting even. And then on the other side of this, let's not lose sight of what we were doing. We're comparing South Africa, Israel, African American community, and Arab American community. Now, the other part of the analogy is Israel has an ominous lobby in this country. The people who were running apartheid did not have an equivalent lobby. And so when you take these...
They also weren't very smart to give it such a name.
We can build on this.
I mean, the Israelis have learned a lot. They call it peace rather than segregation. They call it separation, and everybody applauds.
I agree with the last bit as far as the Arab countries, but I think we have to be also, honest. Probably I disagree with those organizations more than anybody else, but we have to be honest and give the credit when some credit is due. We cannot say they are complete failures, really, and I'm not going to here to defend them, especially I'm in a different organization. But the truth has to be said. They had some success. I think some of them, to a certain extent, the ADC to a certain extent, and some of the lobbying on behalf of the Arab Americans here. These are facts, and they fought, and they have some contacts with the American administrations before and now. And they start, but it's not as the one success that I would like to see. But that doesn't make that they didn't do any success or something, because of the last, what you said, there's a lot of meddling.
Marginal successes on marginal things.
Well, marginal success, but they have some success.
Not about the issues we've been talking about.
Certainly not about any big political issues.
Yeah,
Certainly not about war and peace. Certainly not about getting people out of
or
prison.
for that matter, about the counterterrorism bill. The leading Muslim advocacy group in the United States ended up supporting the Hyde bill and working with Hyde on the excuse,
Which group
the
is
American
this?
Muslim Council, on the grounds that by doing so they would be able to take the worst offenses out of the bill. I think that bill may well have been defeated completely, as was indicated by its so-called gutting in the final stages by the House, had the Muslims given their full support to the coalition of left and right that had opposed the bill outright. Too many people were concerned with, in fact, I was told by the person who convinced the AMC to go ahead and support the bill that, if we wanted to have any influence in the halls of power, we had to learn how to play ball.
That sounds like Jim Zogby to me.
It was not Jim Zogby.
Yeah, but that sounds like the line that he's been pushing at
Zogby
Washington. After all, he's your primary representative here.
Zogby, that's the way I felt about Zogby when he spoke before the Democratic Convention in exchange for they were going to debate the Palestinian issue in prime time, and they offered to let him address the convention if they could.
Yes, but what does it say about your community when Jim Zogby and Fouad Ajami are the most popular spokesmen for you, and to my knowledge, none of you want to be associated with anything that any of them are associated with?
I think Jim, here I have to agree with Rafiq. I think that Jim Zogby has done some good on a lot of issues, and I have to give him credit where credit is due. Also, on the counterterrorism issue, I believe that Zogby continued to be opposed to it all along. I don't think he caved in.
Yeah, I want to disagree with that, and I want to disagree vehemently. Although I think maybe I haven't met Jim Zogby. I've seen him many times on the networks, etc. But I think if someone would take Jim Zogby to the side, off the camera, and tell him, "You really think we've accomplished something in the past 10 or 15 years, ever since the ADC and your offspring of or offshoot of the ADC, etc. Do you really think honestly that something has been done, or have we been just satisfying ourselves with the crumbs?" I think if he's honest to assessing what has happened in the past 15 years, he would say, even though our intentions were good, we managed to score here and there. But for the record, I should say with a clean conscience that this has been an anesthetic for the Arab, Palestinian, and Muslim community in the United States. Unfortunately, all of this effort has set back true representation of the Arab, Palestinian, and Muslim community in the United States at least a decade. And I would think he would give a response like that. He may say something else on the media, etc. But I think if he's true to himself, that is what he would say.
Well, I thought he wouldn't say that because I know Jim personally. And I asked him that the question you asked him, he will claim that he had great success even, but which he did not.
I'm afraid he would take credit for the great success.
I know, I know that he would do something like that.
No, I think obviously you weren't able to point to one thing that Jim Zogby has achieved. In fact, you cannot.
Getting himself on television.
You can. That's a point. You see, I think the crumbs that he's talking about are precisely it. I think, and among the crumbs, included in those crumbs, is the ability from time to time to gather a couple of Arab Americans and Muslim Americans and to go to the White House for a meeting with someone for a minute or two, as if the end is to have a reception or to be received at the White House. I mean, this is not an end. It's supposed to be a means towards something.
But it's not our issue, not Jim or the other organization. Yeah, so our issue, I think, should be concentrated not about the other organization, whether they failed or succeeded. The issue should be what, as Arab Americans and Muslim Americans, what we've done better, okay, to replace this. Because there is a vacuum of power. When there is a vacuum of power leadership,
what are you going to do about this?
That's exactly what
are you going to do about the case of Abu Marzook, which is what we
discussing? What we can do as Arab and American, because we can debate here forever. I mean, that's not.
Yes. I mean, we should have another session on Arab American organizations and impotence.
I beg to disagree again a little bit. I think, you see, these organizations, although, and I hope I'm not revealing anything terribly important here, I think most of the Arab American organizations, finances are not locally based, and those who supply the funds have some conditions for how these funds should be used. If you or you,
especially how they should not be used,
would want to head those organizations, I don't think you would find it very easy. I assure you.
Ghassan, come on, let's call it straight. Isn't the primary purpose of the funding and the putting in place of various people that these people will never be critical of the human rights situation in Saudi Arabia? They will never protest when things like the Gulf War take place. They will never stand up and be effective lobbyists on issues that are of concern to the general Arab. That's why different people have power, and that's why someone like Jim Zogby is put on television because he's acceptable to the Zionist community and to the Saudi community. He's a PR man. And he fills a vacuum that none of you, he fills a vacuum that none of your organizations have been able or willing to fill.
That's true. That's, I think, the issue.
But let's get back to Dr. Abu Marzook. He's the one in prison. He's the one sitting in a 9/11 cell. He's the one who faces extradition to Israel. He's also the Jerry Adams of the Palestinian movement. What is it that you expect to be able to do, or are you resigned to the fact that the die has been cast?
I think Dr. Abu Marzook, the same way he placed the United States government in a position to pass that threshold that I referred to, and take the extremist side of the of the Israeli policymakers, is the same Dr. Abu Marzook who is placing these types of associations and organizations in the United States to either pass that threshold and follow U.S. policy, which is following Israeli policy, and hence expose the internal makeup of all of these gadgets that we have in the United States that are manipulated and run remote control by the different financial centers. And so if they are not going to be able to spring this person from prison, then that would probably send a very strong message to the rest of these people who are members of the ADC, of the AMC, of all of these other things, and say, hey, wait a minute, if we, one of us who's, we know this person, he's innocent and all this, and you weren't able to do anything to bring him out of incarceration. Now, if that occurs, then I think we will be turning a page and beginning another chapter in the internal configuration of.
Now, come on. What does that mean? What is this? What is this new chapter? What's this turning the page?
Well, I think the pro-Saudis, let's call them the pro-Saudi, whether they are nationalists such as the ADC or whether they are religious such as the AMC, will be totally discredited, and the Muslim population here, whatever makeup it is, will be convinced that we need organizations that represent us and at least are able to spring an innocent person from behind bars. That's the least we expect of them. If they are incapable or impotent of thrusting themselves into foreign affairs, we at least can expect them to do something decent here at home.
But Mark, the question that you asked regarding how we should explain to the American community in general their interest in Abu Marzook's situation applies at least as strongly to how do we explain to the Arab and Muslim communities here the importance, because I don't think they understand the importance. When I told a certain Muslim leader that, after Abu Marzook they're going to come for him and eventually for me, he asked, you really think so? Well, yes, I really think so. It's like that saying in Nazi Germany, I forget the...
or they'll quiet you, they'll repress you. Yeah. They'll keep you off TV, they'll stop your fundraising. Isn't that what they're doing?
No, because but look, the way to be effective, I think both Imam Azi and I guess I said correctly, is local organization and taking a radical position, or an uncompromising position. Let's call it that instead of radical. If you can, but that's building things the slow way. And people have tried to build their organizations the fast way, to appeal to someone with a lot of money. At the Minaret of Freedom Institute, we said from the beginning, we're never going to ask for money from any government, Arab government or otherwise. We're going to try to build up a local, base. And that's why last year our budget was $8,000 for the whole year, because we're trying to build money from, indigenous support.
But looking at, I think instead of trying to blame everything on the organization that they're in existence here, I don't think that's the right way to do it. I believe that the imprisonment of Dr. Abu Marzook it created opportunity for all Muslims and Arabs here to rally about a cause, and one that we all believe that he's innocent, and we believe that he shouldn't be, imprisoned in the United States for, especially for no crimes that he has committed. To rally and create the opportunity among ourselves, among the Arab Americans, around the Muslim Americans, to rally and unite us maybe on this cause or this issue, that we can do something and can say to the rank and file that here we're doing something. Otherwise, because then that automatically will discredit other organizations. They are not doing anything about it, instead of start talking about them. And
tell us what you are doing.
And first of all, I think, which is